My name is Gary Cohen, and I'm on my connection to Bhopal is that I'm on the board of the Sambhavana Trust, which runs a free clinic in Bhopal for the chemical disaster survivors. And I also helped organize the first trip of the survivors to the United States in 1989, where they went and confronted Union Carbide at their annual shareholders meeting in Houston, actually, where they got arrested. So just I'm going to make a couple of points, because the video is quite good at laying out sort of where things are at, but just a couple of points by way of introducing Diane Wilson. One is, why is this important after 20 years? And why are people still engaged? In fact, more people are engaged in this fight and the struggle for justice now than there were for many, many years leading up to that. So it's actually grown dramatically over the last several years. One is we're sort of at a critical stage on the planet, and the question is, whose rights will trump whose rights? So the question that I think we're facing, and in many, 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 many different venues, is do people's health and their fundamental human rights prevail, or do corporate rights prevail? And in some cases, it's very stark. And in this case, it's very stark, that you see a corporation that has been able to manipulate the law, flout governments, avoid extradition, not even clean up the site. The pictures that you saw in this are today. It's as if it's the scene of a crime in which people ran away 20 years ago and then left it exactly as it was. That's still the way it is today. It has the eerie feeling of what it must have been like when people discovered the concentration camps after World War II. It's like a scene of a horrible crime. And so they just walked away. So from the point of view of an iconic struggle about human rights versus corporate rights, Bhopal is about as good as you get. And that's why it's really important to continue to engage, to force this accountability, to allow the story of the criminal negligence, the planning of a factory that was designed not to work. That's an important story to tell, because it's a fairy tale of globalization, and Bhopal is one of the more powerful examples of that story. And second reason is because one of the things that needs to be put in place now is fundamental human rights norms for corporations. We have to have a playing field on the planet about how companies are going to operate, because otherwise anything is possible. Otherwise people are expendable. Otherwise people's health are expendable in the pursuit of profit by Walmart or Dow or Shell or Unical or any number of companies that are ravaging around the planet. So that's why Amnesty International has taken the Bhopal story and all of that. They've done a spectacular documentation to say, here's an example of why we need global human rights norms for corporations, because we can't allow this kind of behavior to go on. And so they've joined this struggle within the framework of human rights. Third thing, what have we learned in the last 20 years about chemicals and this industry, the chemical industry? And the woman who won the Goldman Prize spoke to it a little bit at the end, is that when the Bhopal disaster happened, we didn't understand the pervasiveness of these chemicals. Bhopal was someplace far away. Disasters were far away. If there were toxic waste sites in America or incinerators, they were in somebody else's community. They were in Diane's community. They weren't around MIT. They weren't in Cambridge. And so there was always this sense of away. And what we've learned in the last 20 years is that there's no more away. Is that if we all got tested for, in our blood and urine, there would be 200 or so toxic chemicals in our bodies. We'd be able to pinpoint, this is Dow's pesticide Durspan. This is DuPont's Teflon chemical. This is the dioxin from, these chlorinated plastics that are burned around the country. We've been branded by the industry, violated. And the violation is extending into the womb. So kids today in America are being born with chemicals in their bodies. Whose rights get trumped here? Do corporate rights prevail, or do fundamental rights of kids being born chemically free? To me, that's a bottom line issue. That's a violation of fundamental human rights, of whatever religious values you uphold. So this issue has become very close to home, that the chemical industry is not just poisoning Bhopal and Texas, but our very bodies, our communities, and violating our ability to raise healthy kids. So the whole mindset about where the contamination rests has changed. The cancer rate now for men is almost 1 in 2 in this country. For women, it's almost 1 in 3. Learning disabilities is 1 in 6 kids. Infertility is 1 in 8. Is this normal? We can't live on a planet where we normalize this kind of violence against people's health. So, fourth thing. In a lot of ways, this is not a condition that we should accept at all. And that's why the campaign for justice in Bhopal is stronger than ever. That's why Amnesty International has joined. That's why there's now a whole coalition of groups that are taking on Dow Chemical around not only its past abuses, from Agent Orange to Bhopal to silicone breast implants to napalm to poisoning farm workers in Nicaragua to the body burden that we all face. There's groups that are organizing all around the world now to hold them and other companies accountable for this kind of pervasive poisoning. And there's whole coalitions that have come together around sort of getting out of this whole toxic chemical addiction into safer products, safer chemicals, greener energy, greener chemistry. There's a whole movement globally that's grown up since the Bhopal disaster, and that's happening. And then you have groups like Amnesty that are taking these human rights issues. But for some people, it's a really personal issue. And some people, you know, there's a very famous quote by Orwell that says, in a time of universal dishonesty, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And that's kind of the time we're living in now. And so what I think Diane Wilson represents is somebody who is acting as a revolutionary by telling the truth and speaking out and willing to put her own life on the line for not only her own community in Texas, but for people 12,000 miles away. And she's very shy about talking about the things that she does. But there was a point a few years ago, and then I'll let you speak. There was a point a few years ago where the Indian government was going to reduce the charges against Union Carbide to a criminal misdemeanor, which would have meant that they couldn't have extradited the company to India to actually face criminal charges, or Warren Anderson. And so the Bhopal survivors felt so powerfully motivated that there's no way, we have to see justice here, that they themselves went on a hunger strike in Delhi for 18 days. And that triggered an amazing reaction. Diane then said, well, I'm going to go on a hunger strike too, in solidarity with these people 12,000 miles away. And soon, this was I think the summer of 2003, and soon there were 1,000 people around the world that was going on relay hunger strikes all around the world in support of the survivors in Bhopal. And it was a really heartening moment because when you see stories about Aaron Brockovich or other supposed individual heroes, the idea is out there, so these sort of random individuals that are out there that sort of just take on these huge corporations all by themselves, and they're not contextualized within a larger social movement. And the truth is that in this situation, in many situations, people are living within a broad and growing global movement of people that are reclaiming human rights, reclaiming the rights of health, pushing for corporate liability, pushing for safer communities and safer products. And Diane's embedded in that, and her acts are not done alone in the wilderness, but are part of an ensemble of people that are calling for justice around the world. So I want to introduce you to Diane Wilson.